Counterpoint has a promising beginning. There is no captain's log to set the situation up, and we enter the story partway through, gradually picking up the background elements as we go along. And the teaser is short. It uses quick cuts of dynamic camera movements to increase the tension, and there is a grim yet nervous anticipation that is realized when we learn some alien bullies are coming aboard for another inspection of Voyager. And given the size of the two ships that we see, we know our crew has no choice but to go along with it. In short, this does exactly what it's supposed to do: grab hold of us and make us want to come back after the Fritos commercial. The inspector in charge seems to be quite cordial, playing music throughout the ship during the inspection and replicating beverages.
I've replicated some coffee. Black, as usual.
Is the Pope Andorian? We get to watch these thugs jackboot about the place, doing everything but put on the rubber gloves and make the crew bend over, even scanning little sample tubes in case somebody's hiding in there after being hit with a shrink ray. You never know. The inspector's fascinated with the art that he finds, hence the classical music.
Culture has many contradictions. Violence and beauty, science and faith, all somehow mingled harmoniously, like the counterpoint of this music.
If you don't know, a counterpoint is essentially having two or more melodies that are both independent, but nevertheless work together to make the piece. The actual music is obviously different, and I will certainly credit them the use of Mahler as the example of the counterpoint being used. They could have easily gone with a household name like Bach, who is considered one of, if not the greatest composer of contrapuntal music. But they went with a less well-known composer. And I always like it when they break out of their tendency to refer only to the biggest names and classics, and they go instead with an accomplished artist whose work isn't as well known amongst the general population. It subtly makes the world bigger. An obvious point of the title is that this is the way Janeway and the Inspector are going to play off each other, each following their own path, but nevertheless connected and, in a way, interdependent. One is a jackbooted oppressor sowing fear and hopelessness everywhere, and the other's an inspector. Thank you, joke formula number 97. He's only here because his people are nervous about Gahari, outsiders, and since you can't build a big electrified fence in space, they're just going to settle for showing up and breaking things. But the thing they really hate are telepaths, presumably because of Byron on Babylon 5. He's just so insufferable. The inspector mentions 4 telepaths, including Tuvok, Vorik, and Suter, and Janeway says they're all dead. All the other ones, I guess, are just dead to her. But as soon as they're all gone, we see that this was a clever ruse. They were actually hiding in transport suspension, like Scotty was, I think.
We were unable to consolidate their patterns. They've been in suspension too long.
Okay, not like Scotty, I guess. It's been, couple of hours at most? He was in there for, 70 plus years? I get the feeling if he saw this, he'd just shake his head, take a long drink, and then probably fix the whole thing with a coat hanger or something. They're restored, and we don't just see the 3 crew members, but also some aliens who are telepaths. The episode was sold as The Diary of Anne Frank in space, basically. And Voyager's looking out for these telepaths as they cross bad guy territory, but there's a problem. Being reduced to components and held in suspension for long periods of time is apparently bad for you. Probably made worse if you have a pocket full of magnets. To make things worse, they're supposed to drop these refugees off with a transport ship that'll take them through a wormhole to get away. But the ship changed the rendezvous coordinates to an out-of-the-way nebula. And with the transporter making things unhealthy, they can't just do that trick again unless they want to return in 3 separate jars. They're going to have to hope that they can avoid any more spot inspections from the space TSA. Neelix is trying to keep the kids occupied during this.
Right in the middle of
The clearing.
It's not nice to read people's thoughts when they're telling a story.
The rest of the time, go nuts! I will give Neelix, though, he's actually not too bad in this scene. Normally I'd gleefully hit him with a bat, but today, probably just shove him over and kick him a little would satisfy me. But fun is interrupted by the arrival of a scout ship with the inspector on board who wants to speak with Janeway.
Call me Kashyyyk, please.
Kashyyyk? Isn't that the planet that Chewbacca's from? That don't make sense. This don't make sense. And what's your real name? And why are you wearing a coat that's made out of carpeting, huh? He's here to defect and wants Janeway to grant him asylum because, her name and asylum come up so frequently in conversation together. He also reveals that he knows all about the refugees and how Janeway's been hiding them, and that this rendezvous is actually a trap, the only way out of which is to let him come along. Except You're a jackbooted fascist spreading terror, bossing people around, hoping to lock away anyone who might know your dark thoughts, and even admit that you've hatched a scheme your superiors would be horrified to learn about, and... I
wanna know what love is. I want you to show me.
Janeway decides to go along with it after he gives them the means to detect hidden warships, and a dozen are revealed inside the nebula they were supposed to go to. Of course, the obvious answer, have one of the telepaths read his thoughts, would actually not work, because soldiers like Kashyyyk undergo intense training to resist telepathy, you see. I don't know how they practice that exactly. I mean, wouldn't you kind of need to have a telepath around to confirm that? And even if you did keep one around for that purpose, how do you know they're not lying? Oh, yeah, you are totally blocking my ability to see into your mind. Yeah, jackass. Wow, I didn't know you were into that. I didn't even know that was a thing. Is that even a thing, or is that just you? As far as how to move forward, the telepaths have a suggestion.
There's a scientist named Turat.
Oh, I know him. No, you're thinking of the dinosaur hunter again. Ah, damn it. He's a scientist who knows a lot about wormholes and can probably help if Scorpius hadn't found him first. Kashyyyk is a bit nervous about the entire situation, and he admits so to Janeway.
I certainly don't grant asylum to every person I meet.
Only to terrorists, criminals, trash collectors, elves, refugees, and Borg, although the last one wasn't so much asylum as holding her against her will. Speaking of which, don't we have a scientist to hunt down and torture? Let's move it.
Especially ones who ransack my ship and terrorize my crew.
The last thing I want around here is competition. They find the scientist, but he won't answer hails.
I think I can tap into his computer, override the lockout.
What? How dare you, Harry? Such an invasion of his privacy would obviously make him less likely to help us.
Do it.
I'm just fucking with you, Harry. Good thinking. Maybe I won't flog you later. Well, he refuses to talk, so of course...
Can we transport at this range?
Absolutely. Energizing.
Welcome aboard.
Look, I'm not a lawyer, and Federation law is messed up, but I think even there, not picking up the phone is probably not justification for a kidnapping. Listen, we need your help. The bad guys are after us, so we need to find a wormhole. Well, I'm not helping you. You've got to. These are terrible people who push others around that are weaker than them just to further their own agenda. Now, help me with my agenda, or else. They try to good cop, bad cop him with science, claiming that Kashyyyk is a professor who's unimpressed with him.
Never heard of you. Not surprising, considering you toil in scientific obscurity. Obscurity?
You know, that would get annoying fast, but in isolation, that's actually amusing, and more than the FX guys normally get to do with the aliens. They finally get that it moves around, and he provides the last 4 locations in exchange for some fuel and being allowed to leave without further menacing. Eventually, Janeway hits upon a counterpoint for each phenomenon, so they run a check on that, allowing the checking time so that they can do some semi-romantic stuff, you know, like discussing the law.
The Prime Directive.
The Federation's cardinal protocol.
Oh yeah, an enlightened philosophy of the Federation that ensures we do not get involved in purely internal matters.
It seems you violated it when you rescued these telepaths.
Well, if you go by the letter of the law, sure, but the spirit of the law... Okay, that too, but you shouldn't involve yourself because you don't know what the consequences would be. But in this case, I do. It's me getting the gratitude of an entire population of angry, displaced telepaths. By the time they're finished, my court-martial is going to end with me being promoted to Admiral. Just you watch. Counterpoint's plot is really an excuse for more of a character piece, to give Janeway a chance for some romance. Aside of the terabytes of fanfic that have been written up until now, anyway, the series has only had a holographic kiss and that one time that she was leaning against the warp core. And in Season 4, she got the bad news that Mark had moved on and found somebody else. So there's no reason for her to remain faithful to him anymore. She's wide open. She could hook up with anybody, even Chakotay. That'd make the shippers happy, but... you know, that'd be awkward. It'd make their relationship of him doing everything she says, no matter how crazy, kind of awkward. So she'll get what they do, a fling of the week, but it works better than that because Kashyyyk is a former adversary whose true allegiance is questionable. So this puts Janeway in the position of being attracted to the man, but needs to ensure that she's always thinking with her head. That's why she has his replicator switched off. Even though she'd love to go in there for his invitation of hot coffee, she can't take the chance of him replicating a weapon. She has to walk a line between what she'd like to be true and what she knows might not be. One test of where his allegiance is his plan to get past the sensors with everything powered down. They go all right, but somehow the pulse messes with the engine so that on the second pass they get picked up. Whoopsie! They plan to prepare for a fight, but Kashyyyk has another plan. He'll return, do some fast talking so that he's suddenly in charge of everything, and step 3, profit. Janeway tries to talk him out of this, but he insists this is the only way. As he's about to leave, he kisses her, and she kisses the hell out of him back. But then he leaves, and his ship explodes, but he escapes using a fire extinguisher, and the two dance together. Oh, wait, I'm thinking about Wally again. The bad guys soon arrive, planning to do another inspection. Captain? Captain, did you forget to put something away? Something with green blood and pointy ears, maybe, huh? Well, so much for your plan of cooperation, unless giving them up was Janeway's plan, which, well, let's not put anything past her. Besides, right now her mind is on, other things.
Exploring can sometimes be hard to resist, Inspector.
But rest assured, if the crew ever tries this kind of exploring, they can expect a full reprimand. And by the crew, I of course mean just Harry Kim. Kashyyyk plays his usual amiable hard-ass, but when his subordinate is shooed away, he asks how things are going, and Janeway happily fills him in on the refugees being in suspension and that they found the wormhole. They'll be able to finish all this up and it'll all be over. We're so happy you betrayed your people, Kashyyyk.
Go to Cargo Bay 1. You'll find the transporter patterns for more than a dozen telepaths.
What? You horrible betrayer. This is the worst kind of treachery. The kind against me. But Janeway wouldn't be Janeway if she hadn't worried that someone was plotting against her, so she had lied. If he had gone along with the plan, she could apologize later, but instead, he looks like a jackass when the telepaths slip away in a couple of Voyager shuttles. Yeah, sure, they had some to spare, right? Well, let's see. Transporting telepaths, violating their travel regulations, having a telepath standing 10 feet away and not giving a shit. That's really enough to throw them all in the gulag for a long time, but Janeway has a plan. Sit there and do nothing. Well, this bold strategy works, and good thing, too. I'm sure the crew was sweating knowing that when a lover jilted her back in prime factors, her response was, "Screw all of you, I'm depressed, so we're leaving." Given that, they're probably afraid that she's just going to shrug her shoulders and let them all get tossed into prison. But Kashyyyk says it's not worth the embarrassment it'd be for their careers if this all got out, so we'll just call this whole thing off. Post-episode follow-up. Stupid Neelix's moment was during the scanning when it was clear that the guy was having trouble reading any brain activity in Neelix at all. We have an honorary burn baby burn for 2 shuttles that technically did not crash, but they are probably lost. Maybe they were supposed to follow through the wormhole to get them back, we'll never know, and it doesn't really matter because that doesn't really deal with the crux of the climax anyway. It's the Janeway Kashyyyk situation, as it was the strongest part of this episode. While there were a couple of parts of it that made me cringe, in particular the scene where Kashyyyk defects, Janeway's line about him being promoted seemed so out of place, it was like she was already flirting with him right then and there. But it did allow Mulgrew to stretch her acting legs for us, and after much consideration, I'm awarding this episode a score of 7 out of 10. I like that this was a question of guile between these two, but I wish that Janeway had shown a bit more of that. Risking her entire crew with no backup plan, even an implied one, seems reckless, that she wasn't really using her head when the point of it was supposed to be that she had. In essence, it wasn't that she outthought him, only that he thought she was more gullible than she was, and that's not much of a compliment. I'd have preferred seeing her checkmating him instead of it depending on his good graces. It didn't even have to require that as the way out. She could have brought it up just after he made some joke in their last private conversation about how great his leniency is, for her to reveal that she actually had a plan but now she won't have to use it. One of the options that they could have even done for that would be for him to reveal at the end, once he'd dismissed all of his men and it was just the 2 of them on the bridge, that their trick had worked and that he hadn't actually betrayed her. That was all just an act in order to get them past this checkpoint scot-free. But that would mean that he couldn't join up with Voyager later on. He'd be watched, so he couldn't take the risk. So that's why they would have to part ways at the end. Of course, that would eliminate one of the appealing aspects of his character if they did that. That while he was lying about his motives, he didn't stop being genuine in his personality. Even in defeat, he maintains the same air with Janeway as before to show that part of it wasn't an act. One door the ending closed the frustrated some was Janeway's expression after he left. It made it clear that she was hurt by his betrayal on a personal and emotional level, which means that her feelings were genuine rather than leaving the room in there that the idea was that she was playing a game in order to spring the trap on her terms. But really, I'm okay with it as is. It shows Janeway in a way that keeps her human. It doesn't make her weak, and it certainly doesn't undermine her ability to captain. Her foolhardy plans are what do that, but being vulnerable to a broken heart? No.
I'm afraid.